welcome. Today we're going to talk about a subject that's extremely important but spoken about very rarely. We're going to be talking to Feroz Aziz of Anand Rathi about the importance of wills and what is the significance of it. Feroz, before we tell our viewers all about wills, can we start with the nomenclature? Start by telling us, what does a testator do?
Correct. Before that, a will is very important for all of us to make. It is seldom remembered that we all have a finite life, and if we don't tell ourselves that and prepare for a 100% probability event, it's not good. So I'm glad, Samina, you're taking up this topic of educating our viewers on the will bit. I think it's very, very important because one day most of us or all of us would not there in this world, and be preparing for it is important. Now coming to start preparing for it, we need to understand the nomenclature. Like you said, testator is one of the technical usage of a term to a person who actually creates his will. The person who makes his will is called the testator. He is the person who writes his entire will, makes modifications if any, and in his sound mind writes his wishes on a piece of paper, which is called the will. The person who does that is called the testator.
Who is an executor, Feroz?
Executor is a person who has been given the responsibility in the will to actually, when the testator is no more, to bring in the execution of the will and making sure that the will which has been mentioned by the testator is executed to perfection. The person who does that job of the intermediary who takes the estate and distributes it as per the will of the testator is called the executor.
So what are the key responsibilities then, Feroz, of an executor?
See, the responsibility of the executor are four very important responsibilities, because he is the kingpin of executing the entire will which has been mentioned by the testator. Starting with first point is the distribution of asset becomes the responsibility of the testator. Second, the upkeep of those assets. Like for example, if there is a house which needs to be given to the beneficiary, then he needs to make sure that the upkeep of the house is taken care of. Third, which he needs to do is pay the bills of those assets during the transition period from the testator to the beneficiaries. That's one more. Paying taxes like house property tax on the houses which are there in the estate becomes the responsibility of the executor before the asset goes there. Appearing in front of the court to probably get a court permission to dismantle it is also the responsibility of the executor.
Feroz, can a beneficiary or a party that has vested interest in a will be an executor?
See, I think a beneficiary being an executor is certainly possible. Beneficiaries in the technical nomenclature are called legatees, whose names are mentioned. Can a beneficiary or a legatee be an executor? The answer is yes, but it is best avoided so that your will does not get into any litigation, because there is a large probability of the other legatees, which are the beneficiaries, might find or might feel that there has been vested interest in execution of the will. So it's best avoided, but it is possible.
Feroz, can one make changes to a will once it's done, and if yes, what is the nomenclature there that we need to be wary of?
See, as we progress in life, there is going to be a lot of changes in your assets and liabilities also. So modifying your will becomes a very important element of keeping a will, and one which is not stale, which is updated to the current balance sheet. So making modifications is an integral part of upkeep of a will, and that process of modifying is called a codicil in the technical nomenclature. And it's a very important point, like you brought up, Samina. Codicil is what it's ideally called in the technical
And what is a probate?
See, probate is a process after the testator is no more. Probate is a court order which is required in some cases or in several cases to execute this will and distribute those assets and administer that will. Administration of that will requires a court endorsement or an order that this is the last and final will. That court order and the copy of the will is called a probate, and in several cases it is important to receive before the assets can be administrated to the legatees from the testator's will.
Is a probate a compulsion? How important is it?
See, a probate is a requirement. For example, in a sub-registrar office, in several sub-registrar office, before you transmit this money or the property from one name to another after the demise of the testator, the sub-registrar would not be sure that this is the last and the final will. So he will ask for, in several circumstances, a probate to provide evidence and a court's order that this is the last one. So is it mandatory? In several cases of owning real estate becomes an integral part, but we are governed as per state laws. So depending on where that house or the property is, the sub-registrar's requirement will tell you whether a probate will be mandatory or not, but probate becomes a proof to the sub-registrar to say this is the last and the final one, and he can execute it on behalf of the testator and the executor.
Feroze, so once you've got a probate done, you can't make amendments to the will, is that correct?
See, probate is only done, probate is only seeked after the testator is no more. So when the testator is no more, any changes to the will are not possible either way. So probate is a process of substantiating to the courts and the authorities that this is the last and the final one and no more changes can be done because the testator is no more, and subsequently is when the probate is seeked by the executor from the court to make sure that the assets move to the legatees.
Also, if the will is registered, do you still need a probate?
Yeah, a will registration and a probate are not correlated as correlated things, because once the will is registered, it might require a probate, because there could be a subsequent registration which the authorities might not know of. So registration gives you authenticity. Probate tells you whether it's the last and the final will of the testator, and probate happens after the demise. So it is not always that if you registered it, a probate might not be needed when you're actually executing it.
Well, that's all you need to know about the nomenclatures of a will. Thanks for that, Feroze. On the next show tomorrow, we will talk about what happens if you die without a will.